The following presentation was made possible through the generosity of the insurance firm of Lester Smart, Thurman, Tremmel and Arndt, 210 9th Street South, Wisconsin Rapids, Wisconsin.
Welcome once again to my ongoing series of History of Wisconsin Rapids. More accurately, the Wisconsin Rapids area, since we will be dealing with the Nekoosa Port Edwards area and Cranberry country. As pointed out previously, at one time there were many small neighborhood groceries and meat market stores in the area. The store we are about to visit was that of Frank Kubisak, located right downtown in the 200 block of West Grand Avenue. This is how it appeared in 1922. How do we know it was 1922? The large calendar on the wall advertises Henry R. Ebsen Florist, and in conjunction with the clock tells us that this picture was taken in May of that year at 2:23 in the afternoon. Notice the old telephone on the wall. The three people in the picture are from left to right Frank Kubisak, son Sylvester, age 17, and son Etz, age 16. Contents of the barrel on the left are hard to define, but one appears to contain salt herring. The tub on the floor looks like it has smoked fish in it. It was around this same period of time when this undated photo was taken, showing our local postal workers displaying what the well-dressed mailman was wearing at the time. Here's another old photo from downtown Grand Rapids. While I can't be sure of the exact location, the picture was taken in 1892, showing the millinery store of Dora. Obviously, each of the ladies shown here are wearing Dora's very best finery. Fashionable hats are displayed in the doorway, and this was the latest in baby carriages at the time. It was just a few years later when this east side picture of 2nd Street North was taken. The beautiful First National Bank Flatiron building dominates the scene. The new bank building had a very innovative feature at the time, a special children's window in the savings department. Notice how each child is carrying a savings bank. With a special key, the teller would open the little bank and take out the deposit. Back to our street scene. You will notice that the streets were still unpaved and there are no automobiles in the picture. Just one block up the street at the southeast corner of 2nd and Oak Streets was Frechette Saloon, which in later years was the location of Brower's Men's Clothing Store. This picture was of course taken before the days of Prohibition. Notice the neat lineup of cuspidors along the bar. Just a few blocks further north, right here at 195 2nd Street, was another popular hangout. This was the Empire Saloon as it appeared about 1900. The Empire was owned and operated by this dapper-looking fellow, Gary Mason. Looks like Gary could have used some help in hanging his pictures. Again we see the ever-present cuspidors. It's not clear whether the Frechette Saloon was in business before or after this picture was taken, since Mr. Frechette, the fourth person from the left, is shown tending bar here at the Empire. Just behind the Empire on 1st Street North at about the present-day location of the clock tower was the old Armory Amusement Hall, a popular place for dancing and roller skating. The Armory was destroyed by fire in 1938. Moving further north to the 900 block of 1st Street, we get an unusual view of the municipal swimming pool in this undated picture. The picture is taken from an old consolidated news publication. This was the modern water park of the day, featuring not one but 2 slides. Of course, nowadays the slides would be considered too dangerous and would have to be removed. In the upper left, we can make out the Sampson Canning Company building, or was it still a brewery at the time? This river water pool was always a great escape from the heat in the days before air conditioning. Still earlier, back in 1889, just north of the swimming pool in the 1000 block of 1st Street North, stood the Neeves and Podowiltz grist mill, or at least it did until this fateful day in 1889 when the mill was destroyed by fire. Notice the neat wooden sidewalk. This 1910 photo, taken from the west side of the river, shows some of the area we have just touched on. On the left is the Arpin House. The steepled building in the center was the Congregational Church, later the home of the Christian Science Church. Next, the tall structure on the skyline was the city water tower, or standpipe as it was often called. The next building was the Wood County Jail, and just behind the jail, on the far right, is the Wood County Courthouse. Again, referring to the old water tower, it dominated our skyline until about 1950. This is a closer view of the tower, facing northeast. Directly behind the tower is Peach Street. Many of the homes shown here are still located there. In the distance, on the right, is the old house school building. Seems like folks are forever asking about the old streetcar line that ran between Nekoosa and Wisconsin Rapids. I don't have any movie footage of the streetcar, so the next best thing is a collection of old pictures showing the trolley in service. The Grand Rapids Railway began service on January 11th, 1910. In the beginning, the cars were of a heavy interurban type. In this photo, taken at the corner of 3rd and Grand Avenues in Grand Rapids, the line was brand new. The trolley is shown here on Market Street in Nekoosa. In this view, car number 4 is seen crossing the Moccasin Creek Bridge between Nekoosa and Port Edwards, also the location of this dance pavilion. The dance floor in this building was actually mounted on springs. In 1919, the trolley line reached its peak when it carried over 581,000 paying passengers. Later, when revenues began to decline with the advent of the automobile, the line converted to smaller, more economical trolleys like the one shown here on 10th Avenue at about the location of St. Mary's Church. Here's the streetcar on August 3rd, 1929, when it was held up by a team of horses pulling a Ringling Brothers circus wagon. That was the year the Ringling Brothers introduced their spectacular act of shooting a man from a cannon, and this is the actual original cannon. The elephants were most courteous and took the right lane so that cars could pass. In 1930, the streetcar, as always, disrupted the 4th of July parade. It was that same year that the trolley owners applied for abandonment of the line, and a short time later, the line was discontinued. One of the old trolley cars ended up in Mandry's auto wrecking yard, just north of the cemetery on Highway 54. Apparently, Mr. Mandry had considered making it into a lunch counter, which was a popular trend in the early 30s. Another subject that stirs a great deal of interest is the evolution, as it were, of the Mead and Witter families. So here now, very briefly, I will touch on the subject. Obviously, there is much more could be said, much more to be shown. And hopefully, the time will come when that can be done. Jeremiah D. Witter was born in Brookfield, New York on September 18, 1835. The family moved to the central Wisconsin area in 1850. After his schooling, Jeremiah practiced law in Wautoma, Wisconsin. In 1860, he married Emily Lyon Phelps. After a time, they moved to Grand Rapids, now Wisconsin Rapids. J.D. made a variety of shrewd investments and became involved in numerous enterprises. In 1827, he founded the First National Bank of Grand Rapids. He established the first pulp mill in Grand Rapids and foresaw great potential in the development of water power on the Wisconsin River. The Witter family had 4 children, 2 of which died at an early age. The remaining children were son Isaac Phelps and daughter Ruth Emily. After completing his education and spending a year in Germany, J.D.'s son Isaac entered the banking business, eventually replacing his father as president of the First National. He was also president of the Attawagum Paper Products Company and the Johnson & Hill Company. He headed the Grand Rapids Milling Company and was treasurer and director of Consolidated Water Power and Paper Company. He was also a major stockholder in the Prentice Webers Products Company. He married Charlotte Gibson of Green Bay on June 27, 1900. Isaac shared ownership with his brother-in-law George W. Mead in the Mead-Witter block and was one of the sponsors of the Tri-City Airport development. Which brings us to his son Jerry Witter. In his younger days, Jerry was somewhat of a daredevil. It is said that he liked fast cars, and with his airplane, he expressed himself in a manner that brought frequent reprimands. Most notably, when he flew the machine under the Northwestern Railroad Bridge and had his license revoked. The Witter home still stands on 3rd Street South in Wisconsin Rapids. The Witters established a second home in Beverly Hills, California, and eventually made it their permanent residence. George Wilson Mead was born in Chicago on February 22, 1871. He was raised in Rockford, Illinois, and after graduating from the University of Wisconsin in 1894, was engaged in a very successful furniture business with his brother D. Ray Mead in Rockford. On October 18, 1899, he married J.D.'s daughter, Ruth Emily Witter. The couple lived in Rockford until 1902, when they moved to Grand Rapids, now Wisconsin Rapids. The Meads became the proud parents of 3 children, Stanton Witter, Walter Longworth, and Emily Phelps. Way back at the turn of the century, the newly married couple could not have imagined what the future had in store for them. In 1901, J.D. Witter and Nels Johnson acquired the whole stock of the original Consolidated Water Power Company. The production of paper was a natural course. On March 22, 1902, J.D. Witter died suddenly, and George W. Mead, Mr. Witter's son-in-law, was called in to work with Mr. Johnson in carrying out the building of the consolidated mill. On December 16th, Mr. Johnson died in Wilmington, Delaware, where he had gone to buy machinery for the new mill. Mr. Mead, who had come to the Grand Rapids on a temporary basis, now realized that it was his responsibility to see the project through. Mr. F. McKinnon was then elected president, and Mr. Mead was made vice president. The first priority was construction of the dam. This photo shows that hand labor and minimal equipment were the order of the day in the early 1900s, yet they tell us that the project was completed in record time. Imagine firing the little steam locomotive that was used for transporting rocks that were blasted from the tail race. The company's first paper was produced in 1904 on the world's first electrically driven paper machine. In 1916, George W. Mead became president. For the new company, one success followed another. New equipment and ideas and massive expansion were all part of the picture, even in the earliest days of Consolidated. One of the fun projects was the publication of the company magazine Consolidated News. Each issue features stories about employees and their families, safety tips, information on new machinery, and a variety of articles relating to paper making. The February 28th issue announced the engagement of the Mead's daughter Emily to Henry Baldwin. In a 1926 issue, Mr. Mead credits the labor group for support in his election as mayor of Wisconsin Rapids. He carried every ward, receiving 2,060 votes out of 2,832 votes cast. Under his leadership, many improvements were initiated. In September of 1950, Mr. Mead suffered a stroke. He resigned as president of Consolidated, and his son Stanton Mead became president. Mr. Mead spent his winters in retirement at his home in Miami Beach, Florida, and his summers in Wisconsin Rapids, where he died on October 2nd, 1961, of great loss to the community. This tribute to Mr. Mead was published in the October 1961 issue of Pulp and Paper magazine. I recently received this bit of memorabilia showing the old Grand Rapids High School. It was an advertisement for the J.R. Ragan furniture store, printed on a thin sheet of metal with a hole at the top for hanging. The item was compliments of J.R. Ragan, successor to G.W. Baker. I don't believe Ragan was an undertaker, but on the right side of the item it says furniture and undertaking. Baker was an undertaker, so perhaps that explains it. Now, speaking of Mr. Ragan, J.R. that is, what did the man look like? What were his mannerisms? Well, I'm about to show you not only Mr. Ragan, but a number of other local people we've spoken about in the past who were featured in a Rotary Club movie film taken in 1927 at the old swimming pool park on 1st Street North. So here he is, folks, furniture dealer J.R. Ragan. And these two gentlemen are Ben Smart, who headed up the local telephone company, and Isaac Witter, a familiar name associated with the paper mill, banking, and other interests in the area. This is Steve Brazo, a name familiar to many for his community involvement and legal expertise. This gentleman is Dwight Tees, also very involved in this community, which he loves so much, and a premier insurance agent. Bill Huffman is shown here, Bill was owner of the Wisconsin Rapids Daily Tribune and started radio station WFHR about 14 years after this picture was taken. Last, but certainly not least, is Lester P. Daniels, who owned and operated the Hotel Witter in Wisconsin Rapids. Hopefully, we'll bring you more live shots of folks you've heard about in future films. And now for a change of pace, we visit the R.S. Brazo Cranberry Marsh as it was in the early 40s. Things were a lot different back then. Manual labor was the order of the day. As we see here, the berries were still raked by hand. Sorting and packaging was also a manual job, a far cry from the way it's done today. At the time, aerial spraying was relatively new, and the gentleman directing the pilot seems to have gotten the worst of it. Just for the record, he apparently suffered no ill effects, and I am told he lived to be well into his 80s. Maintenance is a year-round chore on a cranberry marsh, as we see here. With those musical notes, I'll